Welcome to this online workshop on tools for time management and battling procrastination. So how this is going to work is that as you click through the slides, audio should automatically start playing if you're in presentation mode. If audio doesn't automatically start, there should be a symbol of a speaker in the lower left corner of each slide that you can click on and play manually if you encounter technical difficulties. The order of voices that you're going to hear starts with me, Balak. I'll be doing the first chunk and you'll hear Sahaley in the middle. We are both counseling center paraprofessionals, and what this means is we are not licensed clinicians, but we both have extensively researched the topics in this workshop, so we feel adequately prepared to present to you. The last chunk of the workshop will be presented by Mai from the Counseling Center. Sahaley, Mai, and I are all a part of the Cognitive and Psychiatric Disabilities Outreach Team at the Counseling Center. We provide workshops on things like time management, impulse control, and more. We have another virtual workshop on impulse control called Stop, Drop, and Self-Control, if you'd like to check that out as well. We're going to start off by having a short activity. Here we have a list of 6 tasks that you're going to rank. You can do it mentally or jot the numbers down on a piece of paper. You're going to identify the order in which you do these things, assuming you had to do all of them. The tasks are prepare for an exam you have tomorrow, take a walk to get fresh air, meet the online gaming community, return a missed call from a friend from high school, order a Jimmy John's sandwich online, or start a 7-page paper that's due in 2 days. Feel free to pause the audio, or you could do this before moving on to the next slide. After you do this, take a minute to look at what you ranked first and what you ranked last, and why that was. Personally, I'd prepare for an exam first, because it's tomorrow, and that seems more urgent than the other tasks I had. And I'd meet the online gaming community last, because it's something that I'd be okay with doing once I had free time and the other important tasks were done, like returning a missed call or starting a paper. It's important to recognize that that's just my list and my priorities. There's no right or wrong answer to this list. It's based completely off of what you see as important and what you want to prioritize. It could be helpful to list things out like this and prioritize them so you can break things down by what you need to get done and what you want to get done, if you have the time. That brings us right to the next slide. This box is called the Eisenhower matrix. As you can see, there are 2 dimensions to this box, urgency and importance. This is a box designed to help prioritize any tasks you might have by evaluating how urgent and important each task is. Things in the red box are urgent and important, so we typically want to do these things, like doing a homework assignment that's due at midnight. The green box is not urgent, but it is important. We typically would schedule these things. While we want to get them done, we might not necessarily have to get them done this instant. So it could be something like scheduling a workout or working on a project that's due in a week. Things in the yellow box are urgent and not important. This can be a little tricky, but it depends on what you find important. For me, it'd be something like answering a friend's text if it wasn't an emergency. While there is a sort of time restraint on that, it's not necessarily something I have to get done, but it's something that I'd like to do. The blue box is things that aren't important or urgent. These are things that we don't really have to do, and there's no time constraint on it. For me, watching Netflix would fall here. Other distractions like social media could also fall here. Hopefully you find this visual helpful, and it's important to remember again that what one person finds urgent and important can be different from what you find urgent and important. Prioritization is personal. It's also important to note that there is a specific box in which you might find it helpful to dedicate most of your time. This is the green box, the not urgent and important box. Some people might think it's the red box, urgent and important box, where you should dedicate most of your time. However, if you spend more time working on things that aren't urgent, that'll help prevent those tasks from spilling over into the urgent and important box. Now that you know more about the matrix, before you move on to the next slide, take a second to evaluate the previous list you just ranked by how important and urgent you found each task to be. Use the matrix to organize the tasks. You can jot this down, or you can make a mental note of it. I mentioned procrastination in the last slide, but let's explore it a little more. Why do we procrastinate? If you do procrastinate, you aren't alone. A lot of students struggle with procrastination, and I find myself procrastinating often. We might procrastinate because we feel overwhelmed by all the things we have to do, or because a task seems particularly difficult. It can be hard to motivate yourself, especially if you're dreading the tasks you have to do. We might procrastinate because of the time commitment that tasks take as well. Once you start on your responsibilities, it can be unappealing to do them once you realize that you'll have to dedicate a chunk of time for them. It can also be easy to procrastinate if you know that the tasks you have to do aren't going to be enjoyable, or if you find them boring or repetitive. There's a lot of reasons to procrastinate, so think about specific reasons on why you do it if you do. In our current situation with COVID-19, your reasons to procrastinate may have changed or adjusted, just like how your escape behaviors might have changed. You might procrastinate because of general negative feelings like feeling anxious or overwhelmed because you have to stay indoors. You might procrastinate because it's difficult to find a private space to work if you're back in your hometown. You could also find yourself easily distracted by family members or other distractions that weren't available on campus. You might feel less motivated to do work at home because the environment is different from what you're used to, or it's different from what you need in order to focus. For example, if you need a quiet place meant for studying, like a library, that might be difficult to find right now. You also might procrastinate because you feel like there is so much time to work on your tasks since you're stuck at home, so you can spare a few minutes or a couple of hours to do something else instead of homework. Since you know you'll be at home all day and you might think you can find time for homework later, you'll push things off. These are all valid reasons to procrastinate. This situation is unlike anything a lot of people have experienced, so it's okay to need time to adjust to it. Take a second to evaluate how your procrastination habits have changed because of COVID-19, if they have at all. Saheli is going to take it over from the next slide.
Thank you, Palak. The next thing we'll talk about is a strategy to help us overcome procrastination. In a research study, individuals were asked this question: what is the minimal amount of time you could devote to a task, even if it ends up being as difficult and uncomfortable as you may have expected? Put another way, even if a task turned out to be tedious and uncomfortable, just the way you may have imagined it, what is the minimum amount of time you would be willing to put into starting it anyway? Take a moment just to think about it. What do you think the average answer was? The average answer was 10 minutes. How can we apply this to our lives? When a task seems difficult, the hard part is often just starting it. Procrastination really comes down to not wanting to start a task. This strategy will help us overcome that. Next time a task seems burdensome, set a timer for 10 minutes. Just 10 minutes. And go ahead and take that time to start the task. If you find that it's not challenging, you've now already done the hardest part, starting the task, and you may find that you now have the energy to complete it in that same sitting. If the task indeed does end up being difficult, well, no worries, now you know that, and you can devote another part of your day to it when you will have enough time and energy to give to it. In the coming slides, we'll be sharing more time management strategies with you. It's important to note that learning all of these strategies may lead us to expect ourselves to suddenly become more productive. And as a result, we may become frustrated with ourselves if we aren't accomplishing all of our goals. Thus, just know that anything is better than nothing. This is especially helpful to keep in mind during COVID-19. Anything is better than nothing. And it is so important to give ourselves that grace, that even completing a small task is something worth patting yourself on the back for. Small tasks over time can still bring us to reach our goals as long as we plan ahead and remain conscious of possible deadlines. Speaking of which, goal setting is a great approach to time management. You may be familiar with the concept of smart versus dumb goals. Here, we'll be talking about MUD goals. MUD goals are just a variation of dumb goals, if that's something that you have heard of before. As you can see, MUD goals are motivating, uplifting, and dream-driven. These are ambitious goals. For example, my career goal of being a mental health counselor is a MUD goal. It's an ambitious goal, and it'll take time and resources to get there. Take a moment now to think about your career goal or any lofty goal you may have in your own life. What motivates you? What is your dream? Now, in order to reach our MUD goals, our long-term goals, we need to first set SMART goals, which tend to be short-term goals. For example, for me to reach my career goal of being a mental health counselor, I need to first graduate and earn my degree. In order to graduate, I need to study for that exam coming up in a couple of weeks. Studying for an exam, though, can be really daunting. If you keep a to-do list, have you ever written "study for exam" on your to-do list? If so, you know the feeling. Studying for an exam requires so much time that we're likely to never cross that item off of our list. In fact, it may seem like such a challenging and large task that we don't even want to start. Thus, SMART goals emphasize the importance of breaking down a task into small and achievable goals. Instead of just saying, "study for exam," try saying, "read pages 66 to 81 tonight," or "watch the video of lecture 3 tonight." Doesn't that sound more doable? Saying it this way is more specific than just lumping the task under the vague concept of studying. It's also measurable because you know exactly when you're done reading certain pages or watching a lecture. So you know exactly when you can cross it off of your list. Versus if you just write studying, we may never feel like we've prepared for the exam and may feel like we can never actually cross it off of our list. Also, because these goals are no longer as large, they are achievable. These goals are also relevant because they help you accomplish your MUD goal. And lastly, it's time-bound because you give yourself a deadline of tonight to read those pages or to watch that lecture. Do you have an upcoming exam? Try turning it into a SMART goal by specifying how much you will do each day to study rather than just leaving it as one large task to be done. SMART goals can also work with writing papers by, for example, saying you'll write 1 page a day, as well as for many, many other tasks. Next, let's put some of the things we've been learning into practice. If you would like to follow along, go ahead and download the file called Planner. This is a document that you can edit, so you can type in your own schedule if you wish. Near the top right corner of the document, you'll see a green box. Here, you can write your to-do list. For example, this is where you could write "study for chemistry exam" or "write paper for Spanish class," or whatever may be on your list. It does not have to be limited to academics, of course. The next thing to do is to break those bigger deadlines into goals and keep SMART goals in mind. You may have to adjust the days of the week as needed, depending on which day you're viewing this presentation. And after doing that if need be, break your to-do list into small tasks and assign them to certain days. As I previously mentioned, if your to-do list includes studying for an exam, then on Friday maybe you could read chapter 3, on Saturday you could read chapter 4, and so on. You'll also note that each day you only have 4 rows. This is so that we don't overschedule ourselves or expect ourselves to get too much done. Only 4 things a day. Think back to the urgency importance matrix at the beginning of this presentation. Try to be intentional about only scheduling those things that are important to you. Now that you have a list of what you want to get done each day, as we just did in that previous activity, we'll introduce another scheduling technique. We're introducing many strategies because naturally, some will resonate with you and some won't. Choose whatever works for you. This technique is called the Unschedule. First, schedule the enjoyable things you want to do throughout the week, as well as the mandatory ones. So for example, start by adding the hours when you're asleep. 8 hours of sleep, very important. Then put in things like meals, showers, personal hygiene, that self-care that is just as important. You'll be surprised because your calendar is already filling up quickly. Next, put in any fixed obligations you have, such as a doctor's appointment or your classes. Also, schedule an hour of exercise or dance a day because fitness is important. And also, most importantly, schedule a lot of free time, recreation, and leisure time. This sounds counterintuitive, but only then do you let work fill up the rest of your time. Break your work into small chunks and work on it in short 30-minute blocks. The main point is that your work time is in the gaps between fun activities. Why is that? This is how unscheduling works. You do not fill your calendar with any work. Instead, you fill it with as many non-work related activities as possible. This encourages guilt-free play. The unschedule works for a couple reasons. One, it works to combat procrastination. Because we're only working in short chunks, it's more doable to get things done. Two, we can give ourselves grace. Because once we fill out our schedule, we'll see that maybe we don't have as much time as we think we do, once we end up prioritizing self-care and our other commitments. So then, we'll see that we need to be realistic when scheduling how much we'll do each day. According to NJ Lifehacks, this technique has two major advantages. One, you show yourself that the focus is on the fun part of your life. And two, the amount of time you have left to do work after scheduling everything is limited, so you have to use it well. Your calendar quickly changes from a list of overwhelming expectations to a record of your accomplishments and a place for fun stuff. Wise words from NJ Lifehacks and valid reasons to try this technique out. We've been referencing throughout this workshop that there are benefits to completing work in small chunks of time. The Pomodoro Technique is an example of that. This is a productivity technique that, one, combats procrastination because we're only doing things for a short amount of time, and two, provides us with a reward. And who doesn't love being rewarded for doing work? Step one of this technique is deciding what you want to get done. Step two is doing it for 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, take a 5-minute break. You earned it. Repeat this process of 25 minutes work and 5 minutes break 4 times. Now the 5th time, do work for 25 minutes as usual, but then reward yourself with a longer break. The more you work and get done, the longer break you get at the end. And this can be helpful if rewards are something that you find motivating. Because this technique introduces the idea of taking breaks, it's important to be intentional about what we choose to do during that break. Once, my sister and I were doing this technique, and we decided to watch the Disney Pixar movie Coco during each of our little 5-minute breaks. We literally watched the whole movie in 5-minute segments, just during our short breaks. So it worked for us that time, but we tried watching another movie during our breaks later, and that time we just ended up watching the whole thing at once. So again, make sure to choose what works for you during breaks and what you know you'll be able to stop after 5 minutes. Social media may be okay, but Netflix or YouTube isn't the best for a 5-minute break because watching these things use a lot of brain power and it can be difficult to stop on time. It's better to use Netflix or YouTube as a bigger reward after finishing the whole technique. Podcasts or music, that's a good idea. And of course, going outside or eating a snack are also great break ideas. Now, I'll hand it over to Mai, who will be taking it over from here.
Thank you, Sahili. In these coming sections, I will discuss the problem that is common in our work and study environment. This is the problem of burnout. What is burnout? It is a state of emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion because of prolonged stress. Burnout is categorized by the level of exhaustion, cynicism, detachment, and feelings of ineffectiveness that one has. How do we recognize when we burnt out? First, you may notice physical signs such as frequent and persistent fatigue and increased level of forgetfulness. Other signs include loss of enjoyment in things that you used to enjoy. And finally, lack of motivation and productivity to do your work. During COVID-19 lifestyle changes, burnout can look like when individuals have increased level of anxiety and consistently feel exhausted about doing nothing, or lack of motivation to continue a daily life routine. Isolation can also create mental exhaustion and lack of social support. You may feel distressed to hear about negative news every day, and this can lead you to questioning, why am I doing my job or attending classes? When you feel like you're going through a burnout, please remember what Sahili said previously. Anything is better than nothing. Please continue to try different techniques that we discussed in this workshop to start your day, or seek professional mental health service when you feel like your burnout is prolonged. Another concept that is highly related to burnout is self-care. As college students, scheduling tasks in our lives can at times feel overwhelming. This is why self-care is so important. We need to practice self-care, especially during the COVID-19 period, because the level of stress and distraction may be higher than normal. We recognize that self-care may look different now, especially when you are discouraged from leaving your house, and it can be difficult. We encourage you to be creative and plan your self-care activities consistently every day. You may enjoy going for a short walk in the park while maintaining physical distancing, or sunbathing next to your window in your backyard or balcony. Self-care can also look like maintaining your basic needs and routine, such as eating 3 meals a day, drinking enough water, sleeping and getting up the same time every day, or doing basic exercise or stretches at home. Now, I want you to take a minute to reflect on your self-care routine. Self-care can also be done during your working time. And I want to connect this concept back to what Sahili talked about when taking a break between tasks. Ask yourself, which self-care activities can be good for 5 minutes break? Please remember to schedule these activities into your daily routine. We know that it can be hard, but routine is important for you to continue living your life and taking care of things that are important to you. As a part of this workshop, we also provide different packages including all tips and apps that you can download. Please feel free to save these resources so that you can start to try them out in your own time.
In our continued effort of providing services to students in our community, I would like to remind you that the Counseling Center is still open and we are offering confidential services to students at this time. You can find us at the second floor of the Turner Student Services Building at 610 East John Street. Our hours are Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And be sure to call us at 217-333-3704 for a same-day appointment.
Lastly, at this challenging time during the COVID-19, I want to discuss about our online interactive program called Callcognito. Callcognito is an online interactive program that teaches faculty, students, and staff on how to talk to students in distress or even friends in distress. Callcognito simulates situations that give you an opportunity to learn how to recognize different signs of distress. It also gives you a chance to practice communication skills and goes over how to express concern to our peers and friends. It explains everything in detail, such as why one response is more appropriate than the others. Callcognito takes about 30 minutes to complete. However, you can take more time if you want to look into the rationale of each answer. Callcognito has an LGBTQ module goes over specific concern about suicide prevention within the LGBTQ community in engaging and an interactive way. These modules are free to all Illinois faculty, staff, and students through the Counseling Center website. The hyperlinks are available on our website. I want to complete our presentations with this quote. Self-care means giving the world the best of you instead of what is left of you. Please remember to take care of yourself and your community, especially during this time. Thank you again for listening to our presentations.